The scene is suffocating. The royal chambers of the Moscow Kremlin are heavy with the scent of burning incense drifting in from the palace chapel, a fragrance meant for sanctity and peace. But here, it mingles with another smell, sharper, metallic, unmistakable. Blood. Candlelight flickers against the gold-gilded icons on the walls, throwing shifting shadows over the chaos that has just unfolded. Ivan IV, known to history as Ivan the Terrible, stands at the center of the room. His eyes blaze with the remnants of fury. His beard trembles as he grips the staff still slick with fresh blood. His chest heaves as if he's been fighting a battle. But the only enemy before him is his own son. On the floor, Tsarevich Ivan Ivanovich lies sprawled, his robes dark and wet, his head gashed open. Blood runs down the side of his face, matting his golden brown hair. His breathing is shallow, rattling. Every exhale sounds like it could be his last. The silence in the room is crushing. The servants and guards stand rooted to the spot, eyes darting between father and son, too afraid to move, too afraid even to breathe too loudly. They have seen Ivan's wrath before, but never like this. The Tsar takes one step forward, then another, until he is looming over his son. For a moment, his rage falters, his hand shakes, but the damage is done. It wasn't on a battlefield, it wasn't at the hands of assassins. It was here, in the heart of the Kremlin, where Russia's most feared ruler struck down his own heir. For centuries, the name Ivan the Terrible has carried a strange kind of awe. To many, he is remembered as the iron-fisted unifier of Russia, the Tsar who broke the power of the boyars, expanded the empire's borders, and dragged his realm into a new era of centralized power. His armies conquered Kazan, Astrakhan, and Siberia, carving his name into the annals of Russian history with blood and fire. This is the myth, a decisive, almost unstoppable force of will, a ruler who cared nothing for personal cost, so long as Russia emerged stronger. But myths have a way of hiding the man, and behind the legend of the unifier was a ruler tormented by demons of his own making. Ivan was brilliant, yes, but also volatile, suspicious to the point of madness, and capable of towering rages that erupted without warning. His paranoia grew like a shadow over the Kremlin, swallowing friends, allies, and family alike. Those close to him learned to tread carefully, never knowing when the Tsar's smile might turn to a snarl. A careless word, a hint of disagreement, even a perceived slight could bring a swift and brutal response. And in one of the most infamous moments of his reign, that unpredictable fury would turn inward, not toward a foreign enemy or a rebellious noble, but toward his own flesh and blood. In a blinding, irretrievable instant, the crown prince, the very man meant to inherit the empire, became his father's most tragic victim. So who was Tsarevich? Ivan Ivanovich. In 1554, the bells of Moscow rang out in celebration. The Tsarina had given birth to a long-awaited son. For Tsar Ivan IV, it was more than a moment of joy. It was the fulfillment of a dynastic promise. After years of uncertainty and political instability, Russia had a clear male heir. His name was Ivan Ivanovich. From an early age, the young Tsarevich showed a sharp mind and an earnest nature. He was intelligent, quick to learn, and deeply religious, traits that mirrored his father's own early piety before the paranoia and violence began to consume him. Ivan Ivanovich immersed himself in scripture, ceremony, and the traditions of the Orthodox Church, believing that faith was not just a personal virtue, but a moral duty for a ruler. Yet, he was no cloistered prince. Unlike some heirs who remained sheltered in gilded palaces, Ivan Ivanovich threw himself into the work of governance and the demands of statecraft. He attended council meetings, studied the art of war, and sought to understand the struggles of his people. When war called, he rode at the head of the army, not merely as a figurehead, but as an active commander. He fought bravely in campaigns against Russia's enemies, earning the respect of seasoned generals and the admiration of common soldiers. To the people, he was not just a prince. He was a warrior, a protector, and a man who seemed destined to rule wisely. For Ivan IV, the bond with his son was more than paternal pride. He saw in him the future of the dynasty, a capable, loyal heir who shared his vision for a strong, centralized Russia. The Tsarevich wasn't just family. He was the living embodiment of the Tsar's hopes for the empire's stability and glory. And yet, that future would shatter in an instant, in the very heart of the Kremlin. In the early years, the bond between Ivan IV and his son was unshakable. The Tsar, despite his fearsome reputation, could be warm and attentive in private moments with the young prince. He personally oversaw his son's education, ensuring that the boy learned not only the doctrines of the Orthodox faith and the intricate web of Russian politics, but also the art of war. The two were often seen together, father and son riding side by side through the cobbled streets of Moscow, or leading processions into the Kremlin's cathedrals for grand religious ceremonies. When the time came for war, Ivan IV didn't keep his son in the safety of the palace. Instead, he took him onto the battlefield. During the grueling Livonian War, the Tsarevich rode alongside his father, witnessing firsthand both the glory and the brutality of Russia's campaigns. These shared experiences forged a deep camaraderie. In those moments, Ivan IV didn't just see an heir. He saw a partner in the monumental task of ruling a vast and restless empire. Tsarevich's courage and sense of duty seemed to affirm that Russia's future was secure in his hands. But history has a way of turning closeness into tension, especially when power is involved. As the years wore on, Russia's fortunes began to falter. The Livonian War dragged on without decisive victory, draining resources and morale. Famine swept through the land, leaving villages empty and fields barren. Internal unrest simmered, fueled by discontent among the nobility and the common people alike. The strain took its toll on Ivan IV. Already known for his volatile temper, he became increasingly suspicious, convinced that traitors lurked in every shadow, that conspiracies bloomed in every whispered conversation. This paranoia did not spare his inner circle. Even the crown prince, the boy he had once proudly taught and ridden beside, was not immune. In the Tsar's mind, no one, not generals, not advisors, not even his own flesh and blood, could be trusted completely. And in the charged, dangerous atmosphere of Ivan IV's court, suspicion could be as deadly as any sword. November 1581. Winter's chill had already settled over Moscow, but inside the Kremlin's chambers, the air was thick and stifling, not from the cold, but from tension. Ivan IV's mood was darker than usual. Months of military setbacks in the Livonian War had frayed his temper. Reports of corruption and unrest trickled in daily, each one feeding the gnawing paranoia that had become his constant companion. That morning, the spark that would ignite tragedy came from within his own household. The Tsar entered the private quarters of his pregnant daughter-in-law, the young wife of Tsarevich Ivan. To modern eyes, her attire might have seemed modest enough, but to Ivan IV, steeped in rigid court protocols and his own erratic sense of propriety, it was an affront. His reaction was swift and brutal. Without warning, he lashed out, berating her for what he called immodest clothing. The accusations turned into blows. His rage was physical, and in his storm of violence, the young woman collapsed. Her pregnancy ended in a miscarriage. The commotion drew the attention of the Tsarevich. Hearing the cries and learning of his wife's condition, Ivan Ivanovich stormed into the room. His face was pale with fury, his voice shaking, not from fear, but from the outrage of a husband defending his wife and unborn child. Father and son now stood face to face, and the air between them felt ready to snap. At first, it was words, accusations flung like arrows. The Tsarevich demanded justice for his wife. The Tsar barked back about obedience, loyalty, and respect. Their voices grew louder, echoing off the stone walls, until the shouts turned into shoves. In that moment, something inside Ivan IV broke. His eyes, already burning with rage, seemed to lose all reason. With a sudden, violent motion, he reached for the staff in his hand, a long, heavy rod tipped with metal, the kind a ruler might carry as both a symbol of power and a weapon. And then, in a blinding flash of fury, he swung. The staff connected with the Tsarevich's skull with a sickening crack. Gasps filled the chamber. The prince staggered, blood running down his face before collapsing to the floor. It was not the act of a ruler disciplining his heir. It was the act of a father, lost to rage, striking a blow that could never be undone. The blow landed, and for a heartbeat, the room fell into an awful, echoing silence, the kind that seems to suck the air from your lungs. The Tsarevich lay motionless, blood pooling beneath his head, his breath ragged and shallow. And then, something shifted in Ivan IV's face. The fire of his rage guttered out, replaced by a look of pure, unfiltered horror. The Tsar, the man who had ordered the deaths of boyars, generals, and entire towns without a flicker of regret, now seemed to crumble. He dropped to his knees beside his son, the staff clattering uselessly to the floor. His hands, the same that had delivered the fatal strike, now trembled as they tried to staunch the bleeding. Witnesses would later speak of the unthinkable sight: Russia's most feared ruler pressing his face into his son's chest, weeping openly. His voice, cracked and desperate, echoed in the chamber. "I have killed my son. I have destroyed my own Russia." Servants rushed forward, unsure whether to help or to keep their distance. Bandages were fetched, holy icons brought in trembling hands. Priests arrived, chanting hurried prayers over the prince's still form. But even in the dim candlelight, it was clear. The wound was catastrophic. Blood soaked the Tsar's robes as he held his son's head, rocking back and forth like a man trying to will time itself to reverse. For days, the Kremlin remained cloaked in a tense, funereal silence. The Tsarevich lingered, slipping in and out of delirium, sometimes murmuring words no one could make out. Physicians came and went, but their eyes told the truth they dared not speak. The heir's life was ebbing away, and Ivan IV, the terrible, who had once seemed larger than life itself, could do nothing but watch his legacy, and his only hope for the future, fade before his eyes. On November 19th, 1581, the Kremlin's bells tolled not in celebration, but in mourning. The Tsarevich Ivan Ivanovich, the pride of the dynasty, the heir who had once seemed destined to carry Russia into a stronger, more stable future, was dead. The corridors of the court fell into a suffocating silence. No one dared meet the Tsar's eyes, let alone speak of the truth everyone knew. This was no accident of fate, no quiet passing in the night. This was the wound the Tsar himself had dealt, the act no father, let alone a ruler, could ever undo. The loss struck deeper than grief. It ripped open the question no one wanted to voice. Who now would lead Russia? The next in line, Fyodor, was gentle and pious, but utterly unprepared for the brutal demands of the throne. The stability of the empire, already shaken by war and famine, now hung by a thread. Beyond the Kremlin walls, whispers spread through the snow-covered streets of Moscow. Merchants muttered over their stalls, peasants murmured in shadowed corners, and boyars exchanged glances they dared not put into words. Some said the Tsar's rage had finally turned inward, poisoning his own bloodline. Others claimed a curse had fallen over the Romanov seat before it was even fully formed. But one sentiment grew louder than the rest. Though never openly, the Tsar had not only killed his son, he had doomed his own dynasty. The death of Tsarevich. Ivan Ivanovich was not just a family tragedy. It was the crack that split the foundation of the Russian state. When Ivan IV himself died just a few years later, the throne passed to his surviving son, Fyodor I. Gentle, devout, and more interested in prayer than politics, Fyodor lacked both the temperament and the authority to command a fractured realm. Real power slipped into the hands of ambitious boyars and opportunistic regents, each pulling the empire in their own direction. It was the perfect breeding ground for chaos. Without the steady hand of the capable heir who might have united the court, Russia slid toward disaster. Crops failed. Famine gripped the land, leaving corpses in the streets and desperation in every village. Factions rose and clashed, each claiming the right to rule. And from beyond Russia's borders, foreign powers, Poland, Sweden, saw an opportunity to strike, sending armies into the already bleeding heart of the empire. Historians look back and draw a near straight line from the Tsar's fatal blow in 1581 to the dark chapter that followed. The time of troubles. A decade of starvation, civil war, and foreign occupation, all rooted in the absence of a strong heir. Many scholars argue that in that single moment of fury, when Ivan IV's staff came down upon his son's skull, Russia's destiny was altered. What might have been a century of stability became instead a generation of blood and ruin. Even in the centuries since that bloody November day, historians and storytellers have argued over a single haunting question. Did Ivan the Terrible mean to kill his son? Some chroniclers, including those closest to the court, insist it was a tragic accident, the inevitable result of a man whose temper had burned unchecked for decades. In their accounts, the Tsar's blow was not calculated, but born of a momentary storm. Anger at his daughter-in-law, rage at being defied, and the blind fury of a father who could not tolerate opposition, even from his own blood. Others are less forgiving. They suggest the strike may not have been entirely without intent. By 1581, the Tsarevich's growing popularity among the people, his proven skill in governance, and his willingness to challenge his father in private may have made him seem, in the Tsar's paranoid mind, like a rival. If Ivan IV truly believed his son could threaten his grip on power, then perhaps the fatal blow was not purely an accident, but the ultimate act of elimination. Whether it was a flash of uncontrolled rage or a cold, dark impulse in the heat of an argument, the result was the same. The heir was gone, the dynasty crippled, and the shadow of patricide forever etched into the legacy of one of history's most feared rulers. In that chamber, beneath the golden icons of the Kremlin, Ivan the Terrible may have only swung his staff once, but the strike echoed for generations. The story of Tsarevich Ivan's death is more than a bloody footnote in Russia's history. It is the moment when the destiny of an empire changed course. Within the walls of the Kremlin, the metallic scent of blood mingled with the scent of incense, and in that room, Russia lost not only its heir, but its future. The man who had united and expanded the nation, Ivan the Terrible, the scourge of his enemies, became, in that instant, the destroyer of his own dynasty. The death of Ivan the Terrible's son wasn't just disturbing. It was the moment an empire's future bled out on the Kremlin's floor. And so, the question lingers across the centuries, whispered in the halls of historians and painted in the haunted eyes of old portraits. Was this the act of a paranoid tyrant, or a father whose fury destroyed everything he loved?